Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the No Name Music Cast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And here we are. We're at the end of the week. It's a Friday night record. We're a little looser on a Friday.
Friday.
Yeah.
Gotta get down on. Did you ever watch the Friday Rebecca Black, Tim? Are you familiar with this whole thing?
I don't even know what that is.
Wait. Okay. We're going to have to do a reaction video after this. Everybody, red alert. Tim is not, he does not know what Rebecca Black Friday is. Tim, you have to stay on and we have to do this is going to go on our Facebook or something because I can't believe you've never heard of this. And Rebecca Black even made a cameo in one of Katy Perry's videos because of this. So I'm about to bring you some music knowledge.
This whole thing just went whoosh over the top of my head.
Well, after this episode, we're going to get your reaction.
Let me tell you, Joy, last week's episode, listening to Harry Styles, that's enough new things for a while for me.
To be fair, this isn't, well, it's new for Tim, but not new for anybody bored after like 95. All right, moving along. I think Tim has some music news or something.
So I have one music news item.
Okay.
So Green Day. So
Yes.
They are celebrating the 20-year anniversary of the album American Idiot.
For real?
Yeah.
Well, now I feel so old.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I thought 20, really? And then I thought, yeah, we used to play it in Rough Justice in the early 2000s. We're in the year 2024, so it does track. But when I saw the headline on Rolling Stone, I was like, really?
Yeah, I don't know how to feel about that, Tim.
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. And they're coming out on October the 25th with like a huge box set reissue. It's got B-sides, bonus tracks, unreleased demos, live recordings, documentary, blah, 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 blah. Usual kind of stuff that you do at these big milestones. But it was more the fact that that album is 20 years old.
Yeah, that's kind of sad to think about. And I was just talking, when I was checking at a Walmart the other day, some guy came up and I was getting Charlie, I don't know, something that had alcohol in it. He ID'd me and I threw it at him. It was like a Mike's Hard Lemonade or some type of beer, right, Tim? Mm-hmm. And he was like, and I was just getting it for Charlie. And so he ID'd me. And he was like, oh, you were born in this year and da 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 da. And he's like, I just turned 32. So he's younger than me. And he's like, and I feel so old now. And I think that he was bored because there was like nobody else at Walmart. So he started chatting me up and like talking about all these facts about how old he is. And I'm like, you just admitted to me you're younger than me. You just stole my ID. And now you're going to spend the next 20 minutes telling me how you feel old.
Well, at 32, I could be his dad and it would be perfectly appropriate.
There you go. I'm not that old yet, Tim, but the weird part is I love how you didn't give any indication. They're still going to think you're 109. The world will never know how old Tim is.
No, it's a trade secret. It's a No Name Music Cast trade secret.
The sad part is you've actually admitted how old you are like 10 times on the show, but no one knows whether to believe it.
No one will ever be able to believe it.
All right. What's next, sir?
Well, that's all the music news items I have on this particular juncture. What do you have, Joy?
Okay. I thought he had two, everybody. I made that up. Apparently, it's only one. So I have one, though. So first of all, this is, I don't think I knew this, but Bob Dylan has a biopic coming out this year. Did you know that, Tim?
No, I didn't know that.
So it's got a Christmas release. Basically, it's supposed to come out in December. Now, what I thought was interesting about this is, first of all, I don't know. It's got the Timothy Charlemagne as non-French people would call him, and then it's like, way more fancy when French people say it. But anyway, he's going to be Bob Dylan. I don't know anything about his singing, guitar playing, anything like that. I know he is a good actor, and so I don't know to what extent he'll be the one performing the music. Bob Dylan is controversial, so like some people might not care if he could sing or not. So with that being said, I thought this is interesting, Tim. Did you know about this as a guitar player, though? The movie is based off of a book, and the book was basically called something about the reaction he got to going from an acoustic guitar to an electric guitar. You ever heard about this, Tim?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it's a Newport Jazz Festival, Blues Jazz Festival, or something like that. Bob Dylan had always been a folk artist. He was a folk hero to many. His tools of his trade was his acoustic guitar and his harmonica. And then he shows up at this festival with a Fender Stratocaster around his neck. And like collectively, musicians across the world lost their mind. His fans lost their mind. Bob's gone electric and things are very different now.
Yes, so Tim is correct. It was called the Newport Folk Festival, which is basically what you said. And I mean, who goes to a folk festival with an electric guitar? That in and of itself makes me think you're trying to cause problems. But basically, on July 20th, 1965, he had released Like a Rolling Stone and was kind of at that point assumed being like a folk artist, right, Tim? And then, so that was the 20th. The 25th of that month, he performed at with electric instruments at the Newport Folk Festival. He had pianist Barry Goldberg and Paul Butford Blues Band, guitarist Mike Bloomford, bassist. Yes, Tim, it's a bassist, not a bassist. It's like a fish. He just played the fish while he was up there. Jerome Arnold and drummer Sam Lay. And with I almost said AI because my brain sees AI so much now, but the guy's name's Al. Playing the organ like a Rolling Stone. Sections of the audience booed the performance. Members of the folk movement criticized him for moving away from his political songwriting and for performing with a rock band. And when I looked more into it, it's basically, like Tim said, they all thought he was a folk player. It's kind of like if Carly Simon comes out with an electric guitar, right? But on top of that, they felt like he was getting away from his roots. You know what I mean? And like becoming more mainstream because like a Rolling Stone had just went like, it blew up.
Yeah, I mean, artists grow and artists change. And I mean, Bob was and still is a folk hero to many. But I mean, you have to grow, you have to experiment, you have to do different things. I mean, the amount of bands in the 80s that had synth players in them. Like at one point, the Allman Brothers had a synthesizer player in the 80s. I mean, you try things out and you try different things. As an artist, you can't remain static unless you're AC/DC.
Exactly. Then somehow they managed to do it and we don't know how.
Well, it's because it's the same album every time, but it's a great album.
I think that's really what it comes down to. They know what they do well and they don't try to stray from it, I guess is what it comes down to. Kiss is kind of like that to me, though. They have had a little bit more variety than AC/DC.
Yeah, I mean, they've had, various other players in the bands over the years after they deviated from the classic lineup. And they've experimented a little bit. They had that concept album, The Elder. Some of the newer stuff is a little bit more commercially sounding. When I say newer, I mean, I'm like 80s type stuff is a little bit more commercially sounding. But it's essentially the same type of thing. I mean, they did Unplugged, but they didn't really do a EDM album or anything.
It wasn't like, yeah, exactly. They didn't really. You didn't see them performing the next version of, I don't know, the Blue Band Group or something.
No, exactly.
So with that being said, I have one other bit of modern day news that Tim will probably have never heard of until this moment. Did you know at the Olympics, one of the Olympic Games, so for everybody who's listening to this right now, it is, I think the Olympic Games ended today. They're going to end tomorrow. They'll end next week. It's right in the middle of the Olympics or close to the end of it. I don't do sports, but I know that it's happening because of society. Anyway, so Paris 2024, I learned that breakdancing is an Olympic sport. Did you know that, Tim?
I saw an article on NPR and I saw a little thing to click and it had people breakdancing. And I didn't know whether that was an Olympic sport, a suggested Olympic sport. I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's a skill. It's very physical.
I can't do it. I could break a hip, but that's about it.
Yeah, and it's representing mainstream culture. Well, mainstream culture if you're from 1987, I suppose. But I don't know. I mean, if you've got synchronized swimming, I mean, why not breakdancing?
I mean, I'm not going to, it's basically a form of dancing and gymnastics, right, Tim? Like you have to be able to like use your arms, you have muscles. I'm not here to debate whether it's a sport, but what is funny is I need everybody listening to this. If you have not seen the Australian lady that is the first breakdancer to come out of Australia, I need you all to go run and watch this. So I'm not here to shame her. I say more on her. She's the first one in the country to do this. But for some reason, it looked like she was breakdancing in slow motion the entire time. And it is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, Tim. And I think on top of the fact that it was surprising to me that breakdancing in and of itself is an Olympic game, it was the fact that I watched her and I started thinking to myself, what if somebody was like from ancient Greek, like the Panhellenic Games, like original Olympic Games, right, Tim? And And they're like, what happened today? And you're like, oh, yeah, we're still doing the Olympics. And they're like, that's great. What was it? And you're like, oh, it was the breakdancing competition.
Like, what is that?
I mean, I'm sure they had like rock throwing, and we'd be like, that's not really a game. But it makes me wonder how they would react to that.
Yeah, the culture changes and the culture moves on. I mean, I think there are events in the original like Olympics way back when that we don't have now.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm sure they had like rock throwing or something. You know what I mean? Something of the time. I don't know why that's the only thing I think they could do.
Competitive rock throwing.
When realistically, it was probably like outrunning a lion because they were into like gladiators. I don't know. Were Greeks into gladiators, or was that only Romans? I don't know, guys. Don't come for me, internet. I don't think that was historically accurate. Tim's like, I don't know either. So let's move along.
No, I mean, I pride myself on my knowledge of many things, but I don't have a great deal of knowledge of that kind of history.
You don't know where gladiators came from. This is Sparta or something. I don't know. That was a movie once.
I would have never seen that.
I only know that was in like the trailer. I didn't watch it. All right. Well, let's actually get to the topic because this is going to be a wild ride.
Okay, so this week's topic is my topic. And, the Spotify. If you followed this podcast from the beginning, you will know I was a naysayer in the world of the Spotify. And then a little light bulb went off in my head. And just over a year and a half ago, I decided to embrace the Spotify. And I'm full in. I mean, if I go into something and I'm paying my $11 a month or whatever it is, I am full in on this. So what I've been doing is my classic music collection, which is all in MP3 format. Mm-hmm. Each day, I've been copying an artist into Spotify. So I've got years of this ahead of me. So I find an artist, I'm going alphabetically, and I will like all those albums in Spotify and then put them in all the little playlists that I have so I can start to enjoy as I call it, my classic collection. And I would say it's Spotify.
What is it when they correlate? When people put like a thing together, Tim, there's a term for it. It starts with a C.
Collate.
What did you say?
Collate.
I don't know. Move along. There's a word for this. I'll think of it in a minute. Curated.
Curate.
Curate. I was trying to say his curated playlist for himself. Okay, well, that was a fail because I couldn't remember the word. Move along.
So I would say about 90% of what I have in my MP3 library is available in Spotify. And there are other streaming services that allow you to upload stuff into the cloud, as it were. But I just went with Spotify because it was the most popular one and it was easier to deal with, etc. So what I do is I put all this music in Spotify to like the albums. And then what I do for the next week is I pick out 20 hours worth of music that I've added for that, the last week or so. Mm. And that is what I listen to on Shuffle for the week. I find that 20 hours worth is about what I need to get me through the week.
You're so much more specific in life than I have ever been.
Well, I like to make sure I'm listening to all my things. So, like on a Monday, I listen to Discover Weekly. On a Friday, I like to listen to, and now that's what I call music. And more or less every morning, I've got my album of the day for the 1001 album challenge.
I do not live my life like this. I am very different, Tim, in that sense. But moving along.
So I make this little playlist for my week. And I have it on shuffle, and that's what I enjoy during the week when I'm working. Sometimes I'm paying it full attention, sometimes it's just in the background, depending on how busy I am. Of course. So what I thought I would do is I thought I would take you through my week last week.
Well, here we go with a very specific situation. So if anybody was wondering in reference to what Joy does, she presses play on Spotify and just hits the next button until she hears a song she actually wants to listen to. And that's all she does.
Yeah, well, as you know, as I said, when I get into something, I get fully into it.
He really does.
I'm making playlists, I'm importing things.
Anyway, so that's my version of what Tim just said. All right, what was last week? Let's do this.
All right, so some of the albums are the ones from my classic collection. Some of the ones I've just added because I really wanted to hear them, and there's a few mixture and stuff. So what I thought I would do, I'm not going to sort of list the albums off. I'm going to go through the list and I'm going to pick a track out on each of the albums. There's a number of albums in there, 20, 30 albums or something like that. But I will pull a track off of each album and we will take it from there.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so the first song that I'm going to talk about is the song Behind Blue Eyes. Now, that is a Who song from the album Who's Next, but this isn't from Who's Next. Pete Townsend recently has reissued a lot of his solo concerts. He had a big box set available, and I actually tried to buy this box set because it seemed really cool. It was a 15-disc set or a 16-disc set. And they were advertising it heavily on the Who's Instagram account. And they were like, click the link to buy. And like the second time they posted it, it's completely sold out.
That's kind of funny. As soon as you said that, though, Tim, I was like, which version? This is a song that's been re-recorded by like 4 different artists now.
Yeah. No, it's not Limp Bizkit or anything like
really,
that.
Tim? I see you at the Limp Bizkit concert all the time.
No. Anyhow.
All right.
So they said this is Pete Townsend's solo version, and this one comes from this is from 1985 from a live version that he did. And I don't know, the thing is about the Who as a band, it's really Pete Townsend's band.
Yeah,
he wrote all the songs. If you ever saw any footage of them performing, he was the one who would address the crowd. Not rarely Roger. It was mostly Pete that would address the crowd. He had
that like stage persona too.
Yeah, and also, if you ever hear any of the demos of The Who, especially like Who Are You and Won't Get Fooled Again, the demos that Pete created where he sang on it, played all the instruments, and he'd written the songs, are 85% of what the finished product was. He would present that demo to the band, and then they would play all their parts, but it was effectively the same as Pete's demo. And Pete has been very brash over the years, and I've asked him about, oh, no, Pete, you've been a musician for 50 years. What would you do different? And like one of his standard responses, he said, I wouldn't have bothered with the others.
Yeah, he's a very blunt person for what I've seen in interviews.
Yeah,
I mean, it is effectively the Pete Townsend band in one way because he was kind of the mastermind behind most of this. And when I watch concerts, it really does seem like he is the front man and the rest of them are almost like we said, they're like back, you know what I mean? Like when you get like a backing band type situation. But I don't think it's also fair in later years to go out and bash the people who spent that much time with you. That's kind of harsh, man.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's Pete's way. And another thing that I've noticed with The Who, when they've been performing recently, a lot of acts now, whether it be Elton John or like Sammy Hagar on his current tour, or any of these other what you call legacy acts, they tend to drop the keys because a lot of these folks are now in their 70s and they can't sing up high like they used to. So you either tune your instruments down or the keyboard players.
When you said drop the keys, they weren't playing the piano for a minute. I had to really think. Continue, Tim. My brain was going different places. I was like, Elton John was on the piano the last time I saw him. And then I realized that you meant like they have to moderate the music. Okay,
yeah, you have to modulate the keys. Yeah, modulate the keys down. So instead of playing in the key of E, you play it in the key of C or D or something.
Got it. I understand. But for some reason, my brain instantly heard keys and thought piano. So anyway.
There we are. So like Sammy Hagar, for example, is actually performing all the classic Van Halen songs 2 complete steps down. And I think Elton does either 1 step or 2 steps down.
It depends on the song.
Yeah, because, he's an older chap and he can't get those notes anymore and you want to give a good performance. But I've noticed with The Who, Roger, for the last 20 years, 30 years maybe, has not been a good live singer. No. He was never a great singer. He was an adequate singer, but he was the right singer for The Who. But Pete, being so brash as he can, Pete can probably sing all the bits he wants to sing in the right key and just completely refuses to drop the keys. And Roger sounds terrible.
Bless his little heart. He's probably just like, the money keeps coming in, man, but one day I'm going to be out of here. I mean, it's a good song. I mean, it's a song that I've heard. I mean, there's a modern day artist, a female artist who did a version of it as well, Behind These Blue Eyes. And I think it's been covered by like 37 people. So.
Yeah, there we are. I mean, this album also has Mary Ann with a Shaky Hand, Won't Get Fooled Again. And he's also doing a cover of the Harlem Shuffle and Barefooting and stuff. And I said each one of these discs in this box set is like a live album from a different era. But I said, if you have the Spotify, I'd recommend you check it out. But yeah, certainly Behind Blue Eyes, him playing acoustic guitar and singing it, fantastic.
Classic. All right, what's next?
Okay, so as I may have mentioned before on the podcast, one of the things I've been doing is that when I go out and play gigs, my tradition on the commute to the gig is to listen to the Foo Fighters because I hadn't been listening to a lot of Foo's music and I thought I would get into the Foo Fighters. And in fact...
Which you did.
Yeah. And in fact, I now own all the Foo Fighters albums on CD because I bought them all.
Of course.
But as I may have mentioned, on the Spotify, they have a load of like these sessions where they're sessions that they've performed at their studio or some live tracks. And they sort of they just have like different numbers against them. The one that I'm going to talk about is called 10. Was it 10/05/05/25? I don't know what that refers to.
10:05. I don't like that means nothing to me, but it's probably obvious to somebody out there.
Yeah, and there's like dozens and dozens of them, and I've been working through them. So this is one that was I added to my week of play, if you will.
Okay.
And this one has a live version of the song "Best of You."
Best of You is a great song. I don't know if we talked about it on your Foo Fighters episode. Did we, Tim?
I think I'm not sure if that one came up. I mostly worked with the Greatest Hits album. I think that one was on it though.
Probably was. I can't remember off the top of my head. It might be why it's so like. I will say, when I think of the Foo Fighters, the first thing that comes to my mind is "I've got another confession to make." Like that's all I hear, like that like intro. And when I learned on the Foo Fighters episode, and I talked very highly about how they did this, is they do a good job. And I mean, whoever's writing the song, mostly Dave Grohl, but whoever's writing the song, they do a good job of like that kind of like slow into it into like a very intense part and then a release.
Mm-hmm.
Like they do such a good job of that and the back and forth, and they build so perfectly that you want to hear it till the end. And I hadn't really picked up on that kind of like structure to their music and why it would be addicting until you made me listen to them on repeat for like a week. And this is a good example of that.
Yeah, and I think Dave Grohl says that he was very influenced by Kurt Cobain's songwriting, in so much because Kurt Cobain was the master of the loud bit, soft bit, loud bit, soft bit. And he said that dynamics, he said that's something that's always stuck with him from a songwriting perspective, and that a lot of the Foo songs have a similar kind of structure.
It's so cool though when I hear something like that and I don't know what it means, and then when you say that, I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like I do hear that. And psychology wise, I understand why that plays to our want to hear it through. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of like, so it's perfect. I mean, obviously we know there's psychology behind the way music is written and why it becomes popular and things of that nature. But good example of that is what this song is.
Exactly. And here's a question for you. Since I made you listen to Foo Fighters music for the episode, is that something that you've dipped back into, or was that just like a one-shot deal for the episode?
I've listened to it a few times. I like a few of their songs. Like they've been on my playlist for a long time. Like I said, for me, I just have like one master playlist and hit shuffle and then hit next. But the Foo Fighters have come up a few times. I'm not like, for me, depending on my mood, it's going to depend on what I'm listening to. So if I'm like in my alternative realm and I hit next till an alternative song comes on, Foo Fighters are probably on there.
Okay.
But yes, Tim, I have listened to the Foo Fighters more. And it was crazy because when we did that episode, I didn't like, I knew they had a lot of hits, but I didn't realize like how many, Tim, that I was so like very, very, very like my hero, all of you. Walk is probably my favorite Foo Fighters song, though. Walk stands out there, and the music video stands out there to me the most.
I mean, for me, it has to be Everlong. I mean,
I feel classic late 90s Foo Fighters right there.
Yeah, I think, as I said in the episode, it's the pinnacle of Dave Grohl's songwriting, in my opinion. I mean, it is just such a good song.
There we go. We're spinning. And Monkey Ridge. I really like Monkey Ridge, too.
Yeah, Learning to Fly as well.
There we go. See, that's what it is, though. It's so interesting. When I was doing this, Big Me was another one that I just like, I knew they had a lot of hits, but until you like stack them up, you don't realize.
No.
Yeah. So there we go. What's next? Now that we just we rewrote the Foo Fighters episode in this episode.
Yeah, that was like a miniature version of the Foo Fighters episode. So if you've missed it, that's a taste of what you could get if you go back in your podcasting thing about 4 episodes ago.
Yes, if you take your hit clips and you hit back about 4 episodes, you'll find it.
Yeah, and it's available on mini disc as well.
Obviously. And we were talking about putting out an 8-track, but Tim's got to call a guy.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. There is actually a manufacturing operation who will make you 8 tracks.
Of course, Tim knows that. I told you Tim's got to call a guy.
Because
You would be the one who knew that.
because a few years ago, Dolly Parton or Dolly Parton's People released her Christmas album on 8-track as like a novelty thing.
That's
and
cool.
And the company that does it, what they do is they go around thrift shops buying old 8-tracks. They take all the labels off. They drop the plastic in some kind of solution to take all the nastiness off it and make the plastic look new again. And then they rebuild the innards with new tape. And then they have 8-track recorders to record them on.
That's such a tip thing to know. See, I told you he's got to call a guy. Once he calls a guy, we'll be on the 8-tracks. All right, what's next?
Okay, so the next one is an artist I'm sure you have never, ever heard of, which is called the Mellotones.
No, I've never heard of the Mellotones.
Okay, so they are a Dutch blues rock type band. And I actually knew...
I don't know what I was thinking, but when you said Mellotones, the last thing I was gonna think was a Dutch. Like as soon as you said that, I was like, really? I don't know why, Tim, but that's not what I was gonna put together. All right, continue.
Well, they were a band I sort of knew through a friend of a friend. And in fact, I once stayed at the guitarist of the Mellotones, Ruben's house in Nijmegen in Holland.
So specific. His name's Ruben, right? Like the sandwich.
Yeah.
Wait, are Reuben sandwiches from? I don't know.
No, it's a US thing.
Okay, moving along.
And they were pretty much a straight up blues band, but they released this album Not the Same. And this is, I suppose it's loosely blues rock, but if you knew them, you would understand how humorous and how great this album is. And there are certain albums that I have in my collection, and I actually I had this on CD, and it disappeared into the ether when I sold my collection off. And I actually found a copy on, I think, eBay, and I bought a copy. I think it's pretty rare, though it is up on Spotify. And this album is just so good. And it's one of those albums that would really be up there in my favorite albums of all time.
It's incredibly random, and it's even more random to me that this is available on the Spotify.
Yeah, I would recommend you check out the song King of the Jam.
King of the Jam. I'm writing it down, Tim. Silence, like I needed silence to write it down.
Yeah, I mean, you do. I mean...
King of the Jam. All right, it's written down, Tim.
Yeah. I mean, that's good. And I mean... You Got to Have a Man's good as well. And what another cool thing about it is, much like Sergeant Pepper, maybe the first time that the Mellotones and Beatles Sergeant Pepper have been said in the same sentence.
I would probably agree with that. Maybe
most of the tracks flow from one end to the other, to the other, to the other. And the way that they've done it is actually really cool.
Oh, you mean like there's no breaks between songs?
That's correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like, don't all songs start from the beginning to the end? And then I realized what you meant. But
it's almost like it's to be enjoyed in one piece. And the way that they've flowed one track into the next track into the next track is really cool. And I think after this album came out, I think Ruben left, and then the bass player Mike, I think is it Mike, somebody left, and then someone else left, and then it went back to being a blues band again. And the guy Mike Donkers, who is the singer, or was it Mike CD? No, I think it was Mike Donkers was the singer. And Mike CD was the bass player. That was correct. And I think it went back being.
Are there a lot of mics?
Apparently so. And he just went back to being a blues band called Mike and the Mellotones.
I mean, there was 2 mics in the band, so I see why they might go with that.
There we are. Well, I'm sure if any of the members of the Mellotones are listening to this, so I'm sure they all listen, they would be delighted to know that I'm listening to this in 20 plus years later, and I hold it in such high regard.
Do you have Ruben on Facebook or the threads, Tim? You need to go track him down.
I knew them at the time through a friend. And then me and my friend went out to Holland. We drove out there, stayed at their place, spent a couple of days there, and then we came back. And I don't know, it was, Facebook was sort of a thing then, but it wasn't the all-encompassing way that connects our society together. And I don't know, I never really heard from them
there
again.
Can't be that many people named Ruben from Holland. I don't think it would be that hard to find him.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the CD and it has all their full names in it. Maybe I could find them, but as I said...
You should try to find them and send them this episode, Tim, specifically. Just see what happens.
Yeah, but I said it's the Mellotones, Mellotones, Mellotones. And I said, check out King of the Jam. That is by far my favorite song.
All right. Well, I don't know what I was expecting, but when you said belly hooks, I wasn't expecting Dutch blues. What's next?
Okay, so comes from the 1001 albums challenge. So I add those albums to my collection every day, which I do with our listener Megan. And this is an album by Megadeth.
Okay.
Are you a big fan of Megadeth?
I've listened to a few of their albums. I wouldn't say I'm huge, but I'm familiar with them. Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to pick out the track "Peace Sells, but Who's Buying?"
I am familiar with this song, and it's kind of random. It was weird whenever Tim used to work with me, guys. I'm gonna just hold off for a second. Tim is such an interesting person because when we used to work together, I'd come in his office. He'd have a little speaker that he would always be listening to music on, and I was always like, Tim's like me, so most of the time, I didn't think anything of it. But I would occasionally walk in and he'd be listening to something like Megadeth, and I don't know why, but that would always surprise me. But Peace Sells is one that stands out to me because I've seen the music video a lot, and there's like money like popping up, and I think it's supposed to be like kind of like political, economical. Yeah, Peace Sells.
Yeah, Dave Mustaine is one of these people who makes a statement with his music. And as you know, Dave Mustaine used to be a member of Metallica way back when. And I think he was actually fired from Metallica. And almost like in a kind of retaliation.
What could you do to like be fired from Metallica? Has to be something kind of bad, I would think.
Yeah, maybe if he's not fired, it was a case of he said, she said, and that was the end of that. And then then he went away to set up Megadeth. And, Metallica have had the bigger commercial success by a huge degree, but certainly in the metal community, Megadeth are a huge band.
Yeah. It's one of those bands that like I wouldn't go out of my way to listen to, but they occasionally pop up on my playlist, if that makes sense. I'm not huge into metal, but Tim would surprise me because it would be like, and he's like me, and you might be listening to, well, not him, but for me, it might be I'm listening to Paris Hilton's Stars Are Blind, and then the next song is The Clash. Whereas Tim is like you're sitting in his office at 1 minute, it's Cyndi Lauper, then Megadeth comes on.
I mean, so, it can happen.
It's just life. It's just life, y'all. But I always remember you had the tiniest little speaker right there in front of you so that you could press the button to pause it while people came in.
Yeah, it's an Anchor Bluetooth speaker. And if you crank it up a bit, for the amount of money it costs, it actually sounds pretty good. And it has back in the day, on your stereo, you had a loudness control. And what the loudness control would do was just make it incredibly bassy. So if you're listening to it at low volume, it sounded a lot fuller. Now, this little speaker has a similar thing where it has like ultra mega up bass or something like that. So I had that engaged. And of course, it's in my office. It's not very loud. But if someone comes in and wants to talk to me, it's got the little button on the top and you press it and it goes off.
I have a very distinct memory of Tim pressing it to talk to me.
Yeah, it's polite. Someone comes in your office and you just want to hear exactly what they're saying. So
there you go, Tim. That'll be the memory I have of you for the rest of my life. Oh, you're coming in. Let me pause Megadeth. All right, what's next?
Okay, so this one is leaning into an act that you got me to listen to that I was not really familiar with before.
Yay!
And I added the whole album because this was in my classic collection, so I added it into this playlist for listening to at work. And this would be Bikini Kill.
Yay! One of my favorites.
Yeah. The version of the album that you got me to listen to is a big expanded edition that they have on Spotify. But the album that you got me to listen to, I picked up one of those tracks. And of course, it's Rebel Girl. Which
is the iconic, bar none, nothing beats it. Like I can sing in my sleep, Bikini Kill song. Tim picked my favorite. And that song was the one that whenever Rock Band, the video game came out, I would have like friends because I was in college when Rock Band came out. And so there was a local house that I would go hang out with some friends at, somebody who had their own apartment when I lived on campus, and we'd always play Rock Band and Bikini Kill was on there. And so I'd have to sing Rebel Girl at the top of my lungs, not worrying at 3 and the people downstairs could hear me like an adult thinks about now. And that was when I was hired to be the singer for my friend's Rock Band because he said I was the only one who could ever hit all the notes. And that is like one of those distinct memories. Like, you know what I mean, Tim? When you think back about songs, I just distinctly remember sitting in Sean's house and me and like 10 of my other friends just playing Rock Band and me screaming Rebel Girl at 3 a.m. Well, it's very specific, but
yeah, I mean, I've sort of grown to have an appreciation of Bikini Kill. It's maybe not an everyday listen for me, and it's so grungy and low fidelity, and it sounds like it was recorded very cheaply and not recorded very well. And I think that's part of the charm.
I think so too. That's 100% what it is because they're from Washington, that kind of grunge early 90s feel, but I feel like they have more of like the Clash meets a metal band in a way. If you've never listened to Bikini Kill, just give them, there's obviously punk rock is what they're going for, but like Tim says, it sounds like their music is all partially unedited and they're big feminists with feminist lyrics, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they were very much making a statement with their music.
Yes. If you've heard of the Riot Girl movement, they actually pioneered that. Like that's like a movement in music. It's called Riot Girl.
Okay.
There you go. Tim's like, I have no idea what that means, but it might mean something to someone who's listening. All right. What's the next one, Tim?
Okay. So the next one is Metallica. And this was very unusual. I didn't even know this existed or they did anything like this. So It's a live album. And it was done as a charity type concert that they played. And it's called Helping Hands Live and Acoustic. And they are playing classic Metallica songs, but they're playing them unplugged.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that existed either, but that's kind of interesting. Very opposite of Metallica.
Yeah, I mean, they do things like Nothing Else Matters and Four Horsemen and Hand Wide to Self-Destruct. But the track I'm going to pull out is the obvious one, which is Enter Sandman.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting to hear those songs in an unplugged format.
Especially Enter Sandman, because if you live in our area, as Tim has said on this podcast, the local college that's like huge and it's the big engineering school near us is Virginia Tech. And every fall, me and Tim don't participate in the footballs or the American balls or anything related to sports, but they have a football team here that's huge. It's like a national football team, and they're usually, some years they're good, some years they're not. I don't know all the details, but whenever they enter the stadium and it goes national, it's always Enter Sandman, Tim. And part of the reason they picked that is because of the kind of the bass line, the drum bass that like builds and like people are jumping and they're literally jumping in the stands. That's kind of the thing. So it's kind of weird to think about a song that I associate with like such a hard bass line like that being stripped down.
Yeah, I mean, on the tracks, there's still drums and bass on it, but the guitars are all acoustic. And much like the classic MTV Unplugged, having an acoustic guitar makes it sound so much different.
Yes.
Because it takes a lot of the energy out of it, so it gives it such a different sound.
I guess that's a better way to say it. Because, I mean, I imagine the beat's still there, but like that energy with the guitar and the build-up with that kind of bass line is what I associate with Enter Sandman.
Yeah, I mean, as I've probably said before, I have a very specific memory of purchasing the Black Album from Woolworths in Hounslow and then being on the top deck of the 281 bus reading the liner notes on the way home when it came out.
There you go. Well, if you ever want to redo that, Tim, yourself and do a version of you on an acoustic guitar, you need a drummer, pull Molly. She does her Enter Sandman on the drums very, very, very well, Tim.
Okay, well, I've been thinking of doing some more videos on YouTube and the like.
Well, I'm just saying, if you ever need a good percussionist, and she's one of those she's like you, Tim, in the sense that like, even if she doesn't know the song, she can figure it out really quickly. So
yeah, I have a very quiet time coming up band wise. This is an exclusive for our listeners. I don't know how the band I play in is going to be at the end of this year. Whether we'll have another year out of it or not, I don't know. That's to be decided. But anyhow, in the interim period, while I'm trying to find some other avenues to play music live, I may be making some more YouTube videos.
Well, if you need, like I said, I'm just saying, if you want to do a Metallica song, she's usually pretty good. She's a good option, Tim.
Okay, well, maybe we could do a collaboration online. I don't know.
There we go. Fair enough. All right, what's next?
Well, this is an album that I bought on CD in a thrift shop for 50 cents. So I ingested it into Spotify as well.
I like how he says that, like he hasn't done that with like 40 million other albums.
Well, you know.
It was just funny the way you said it, like the lead up. I don't know. Continue.
Okay, so this comes from a classic rock act, a controversial classic rock act, a classic rock act that everybody would know.
Okay.
Milli Vanilli.
Of course.
And it is an iconic album, Girl, You Know It's True. The album that famously where they
Yeah.
was found out that I think it's Rob and Raz, the people on the cover, didn't
Yep.
sing on it. They were session singers. They were just paid to dance and lip sync. And there was a whole thing at the time where people were outraged about this, and you could send your album back for a refund if you wanted one.
Oh, look how far we've come now.
Yeah, I mean, at the time they said that Milli Vanilli were frauds, and everyone now recognizes them as pioneers.
And I mean, wasn't it the same person who like founded Boney M?
Yeah.
Isn't that like the thing? The
Yeah.
founder, I mean, if you guys don't know this, I mean, we all love Rasputin, but Boney M wasn't singing either.
No, it was completely a studio act. They would get people that had a great look or could dance or how they wanted to present this music. And
Very
they would be-
70s looking. Yeah.
Yeah, and Milli Vanilli was the same. They had these two chaps. They had a particular look they were looking for. They could dance. Perfect. And the fact that they weren't singing on the track was irrelevant.
But my thing is, though, Tim, is how is it so shocking to people that the same founder did it a second time when he did it anyway? I digress.
Well, I mean, people just like to be outraged about stuff. That's what it boils down to.
All right. Well, which song did you pick, Tim?
Well, I mean, there's many to choose from on here. I mean, do you go with "Baby Don't Forget My Number"? I mean, what do you go with? "Blame It on the Rain" and
Blame It on the Rain is the first one that comes to mind when I think of Milli Vanilli. And the music video is iconic where they're like singing it, "Blame It on the Rain," and they're just looking pretty in the music video while rain's hitting them.
Well, of course, but I mean, I'm not going to go for that. I'm going for the big classic. This is the only song that you could really talk about when you talk about Milli Vanilli, and it's "Girl, You Know It's True."
True. That is true, Tim. Girl, you know it's true. That's a good choice. I mean, how popular was Milli Vanilli, you think, in the UK? Were they really popular?
It was absolutely huge at the time. It was certainly "Girl, You Know It's True" was such a big hit.
That's not surprising to me because I could see how they could easily play into kind of like club culture and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that was fair. I assume I wasn't in the UK or in England or Great Britain. I don't even know what to call them anymore. They're not European. They're not part of the Euro anyway. So back to what I'm getting at, though, is I could see how that would work. What I assume was going on in the 80s. I feel like club culture was very heavy.
Yeah, it was. And this song was all over the radio. They were playing the video on Top of the Pops. And I think they even performed.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Yeah, on Top of the Pops at the time. I said it was huge.
They were dancing, Tim. That's something. Standing there looking pretty takes talent. I would know, obviously.
I'm not sure.
Someone out there got that joke. But anyway, no, I find it funny to think about the whole Boney M connection to Milli Vanilli, and people were so outraged over it. I'm like, have you guys not realized if a tiger shows you its stripes, wait, tigers don't have stripes, do they? Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Tigers have stripes. If a tiger showed you his stripes, believe them. I was trying to picture a tiger after I said it, and all I could see was a lion.
And they're different lines, and they're both big cats.
I realized that, yes, Tim.
Have you ever seen any of those videos in zoos when they give big cats catnip and they put them in? They give them a box to play with.
Yes, and it's the cutest thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's all the same character traits of a domestic cat. These big cats do. So they give them a huge box, and then they just get in it and sit there proud as they like.
I mean, they're cousins, they're very similar. And always when I see those videos, I think, you mean to tell me I could be making money doing this? And I chose to sit behind a computer every day?
Yeah, when you could be getting into a lion enclosure and making a massive cardboard box.
Yep. It does make you. I saw recently, so there's a polar bear habitat where they had saved a bunch of polar bears from, sadly, if you aren't familiar, everybody, their habitats are literally melting away. It's actually quite sad, but anyway. But they had a polar bear rehabilitation center. It wasn't like a zoo or anything, because I don't, support like just enclosing animals to enclose them for our enjoyment. Back to the point, though. They got them, Tim, they got them giant, I mean, huge tennis balls, like bigger than my body, and threw them in the polar bear thing. And when I say the polar bears broke them in like 2 seconds, they did. But what was funny is they like popped them, right? But then they took them on the water and were riding them like their little ice things. And I thought that was the cutest thing ever. Like, when you see a polar bear just like riding on the ice, they were doing that with the little pop tennis balls.
Oh.
How adorable, right? Not that this is a polar bear channel, but everybody needs to go watch that video.
Okay, check it out on the YouTube.
I'm sure like the money goes to the rehabilitation center, and those polar bears deserve it.
There we are.
Everybody's like, I didn't know I was coming for a PSA, but all right. All right, what's the next song? I got a little sidetracked.
That's okay. So this is from a band called Big Country. Are you familiar with the band Big Country?
I actually am, yes.
Okay, so this is from their album The Crossing, which was added to my collection. And this is just their sort of title song, if you like, called In a Big Country.
I'm familiar with that song. And I think the only reason I'm familiar with it is because I kind of grew up in this area, Tim. But I don't know much. But didn't one of the lead singers pass away or something? Something happened bad to the band, and that's why they never went any further.
Yes, Stuart Admonson, I believe it was the singer of Big Country. I think he sadly took his own life. It was very sad.
It was like in the mid 2000s, and that's why they kind of like, from what I understand, after that happened, the band kind of dissolved.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much his band. He was the voice of the band, and they were a Scottish band, and they had a kind of Celtic type influence to the music. I don't think they necessarily used bagpipes and stuff, but it had that kind of sound to it.
It's weird to me that you said that, though, because I distinctly remember this song I was saying in this area it played on the radio here and stuff a lot when I was younger. Kind of like if you were like on an 80s, 90s, you know what I mean? 99.1 where we lived, 10 PlayStation. This was a song you would hear.
Yeah. They also did the soundtrack to a film called Restless Natives, which was an early 80s like cult classic film, like low budget cult classic film. And you remember like back in the day when you go to the video shop and you would hire a film, and when you played it on VHS, it would have like previews at the beginning.
Yeah.
Certainly I remember when we first got a video recorder, and you get rental tapes, often they'd be promoting the film Restless Natives. I think I saw it back, years and years and years ago, and I haven't seen it. And I know someone who saw it a number of years ago and said it didn't hold up. But it was about these two thieves basically on motorcycles who'd go around robbing people and robbing shops. But it got to the point where they became like these cult heroes, and they'd come in somewhere and they'd rob a bank, but then people would give them cakes and stuff, and it was
people were cheering them on at that point at some point. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, and Big Country did the soundtrack for it. I really need to check it out because I remember that film from a long time ago. I remember it was kind of cool, but I don't know.
You know what's interesting, Tim? You were talking about at the beginning of VHS when you had the previews, kind of like you're at the movie theater. I always find it interesting if you go back and watch like one of those now and you see the preview for a movie you're very familiar with. It's kind of interesting to see what parts they chose in the preview. Like I've done that a few times where I've watched like an old movie and it'll be like a preview for something that came out in like 1997. Let's say The Lion King. And it's got like different pieces and it's like Simba and his father and how, now I know, so spoiler alert if you haven't watched The Lion King, Simba's father dies and things like that. Like it's so interesting when you watch those now and see what they chose to kind of get you to watch the initial movie.
Yeah, it's like if you can put it up on YouTube, the original theatrical trailer for Star Wars, what was shown back in '76 before the film was released, and you watch it, and it's like you say, it's interesting to see how they were selling that film, and also what clips they decided to use.
And like one that sticks out to me, since I was going to make the Lion King reference, there's a part where Timon and Pumbaa, they sing this part, if you want hungry for something to eat, and they're like trying to distract the hyenas and they're pretending to be a luau. And I distinctly, that's one of my favorite scenes in the whole Disney Lion King, right? Like they're singing and dancing and they're in a luau. And like when I was a kid, I loved it, thought it was hilarious. That is in the trailer for it. And I was like, it's funny they picked that one piece out because it was like one of the funniest moments in the whole movie. And like, I don't know, that one just sticks out to me, Tim.
Yeah, and then sometimes you find what they use in these trailers never actually makes it to the actual finished product.
Yeah, that happened to me too. I know exactly what you're talking about. Or they pick like things that don't really lead up to what you're like, really? That's what you chose? That's not even like a main part of the movie.
That's true. And also the voiceover always goes without fail. In a world.
Well, I thought you were going to do your sucky voice.
I'm not human sucky. I'm in another world.
But it's funny. If you guys are listening, go pick some of your favorite movies that you watched back in the day and just look up their trailers on YouTube. It's surprising. It really is.
Yeah.
That's my advice. All right. What's the next song, Tim?
Okay, this is another one from the 1001 Albums Challenge. This is the band Talk Talk, their album Color of Spring. And I'm going with the track, which is probably the one that you're familiar with, is Life is What You Make It.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest hit they had here. I mean, this is the song that I would imagine Tim listening to, but I don't know why. It feels very Tim-esque.
Yeah, it was a song I remember when it came out. I mean, they had some other hits, but I mean,
Okay.
this is probably their biggest hit, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, where are they from? They're not from America, obviously.
No, I think they're a British band.
I mean, they seem British, but I don't know if that's true. Don't come for me, internet, if they're like from Australia. They're like, darn, Americans don't even know who's British anymore.
I don't know. We have a Googling machine here. Let's have a look. Talk,
Give
talk.
it a goog.
Talk, talk. It says Talk Talk were an English band formed in 1981.
Oh, there you go, Tim. You were right. If you could have been wrong, it'd have been fine because you were British. But as well, you were British at one point. He's American now, everybody. But
I am.
with your British heritage, you're allowed to be wrong. In my sense, they're just like Americans don't know nothing. They think they're so cultured. I learned today, by the way, I ended up in like some weird TikTok spiel where I was streaming through videos, and a lot of people with British accents say it's hard to say words with R's. Do you agree with that, Tim?
Give me an example.
Like girlfriend. She's having a hard time saying boyfriend, like things like that.
Girlfriend, boyfriend? No.
You sound fine. She like really, when she was trying to do an English accent, she said she really feels like they emphasize the R's. It was the Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things, the young girl. She was the one talking about how, because she does a really good English accent. Well, naturally, she has English. She has a really good American accent. That she was saying that her English accent comes from her chest, her Australian accent comes through her throat, and she feels like her American accent comes from her head.
Interesting. Do you know who does a really good British accent that I didn't even know?
Who?
Dallas Bryce Howard, which is Ron Howard's daughter.
So random.
Yeah, who plays Elton John's mother in the Rocket Man film.
Was that really her?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm not a cinema person. I'm not a film person. I don't know who these people are. And I watched the film and I assumed that it was a British actress who played the part.
I did too, because she had a really British accent.
And that's what I thought. And then it was only when I saw some, like interviews about the film and they were showing people, being interviewed about what they were doing in the film. And I was like, really? And then I looked her up and found out there's Ron Howard's daughter. And honestly, you hear it, the way that she does like a pinner London accent is perfect.
Spot on. There you go. Well, now I learned something new. I would have just assumed it was just like a British actress I wasn't familiar with, if I'm being honest. But what I find funny is, you've talked about a few times people ask you if you're from Australia. Mm-hmm. And you've written down, Tim has a spreadsheet of how many times that's happened to him. But anyway.
Well, I did it for a year. I haven't a few
he
years
hasn't
ago.
done it for life. But anyway. But what is interesting, though, is in people who have like an English accent sometimes get a little insulted by that. But from an American's perspective, they're not all that different. British and Australian, there is a sound to me that's different, but I know the lingo, like different words you guys say might be different, right? Just like different words we say here, like when you say the boot of your car, you're talking about a trunk for me. But I don't find them to be that different. And that's why I'm like, I don't feel like it's that much of an insult. Do you find it insulting, Tim, or is it just interesting to you?
It's just interesting. It's not an insult at all. I mean, to me, it's completely different.
Really?
Australian, South African, they're all different. But no, they are most definitely different. You meet someone from Australia, and it's very clear they're from Australia. I mean, my ear is tuned now to the point where I can hear if someone's from Canada.
I can too, though. I will agree with you on that. And it's usually in the vowel sounds.
Yeah, because I watch a YouTuber who does a vinyl record thing on. He has a channel on there. Well, give him a shout out. Frank Landry of Channel 33 RPM. Great YouTube channel if you're into vinyl records. And I was watching it when my mum was here. And I was playing. She was watching it with me. And I said, can you hear that he's from Canada? And she said she couldn't hear the difference.
See, that's so interesting to me because I feel like you always hear it in the vowel sounds. And it could be because a lot of my French teachers were Quebecois. And so for me, that's, what they speak when they speak Quebec French and things of that nature. That's what you call them. And so, but I feel like in the vowel sounds, you can hear it, like the A's and the O's. I feel like I can tell if someone's Canadian. They tend to draw them out more.
Yeah. And they say, what's that all about?
Mm-hmm. It's usually something like that. It's usually with the vowel sounds. But I don't know. There's definitely a difference, just to clarify, between like British sounding people to me and Australian sounding people. But I just don't find them to be that far apart, if that makes sense, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not, I mean, certainly where I lived in London, and I was not far from Earl's Court, and Earl's Court was traditionally a large community of Australian people from there. And I think there's some reciprocal agreement, like if you're under 30, you can go and live and work in Australia for a certain amount of time, and if you're Australian, you can come the same in the UK. So being in and around Australian people is not anything super unfamiliar to me. So that's where I hear the difference.
That's probably what it is. You're just super familiar with it. So for those out there listening who have been insulted because you're British and someone that you're Australian, to the American's ear, it's not that different. Just FYI, everybody. All right. I think we have time for 2 more songs, Tim.
Yeah, let's go for a couple. Yeah, a couple more. All right. So this one will surprise you.
Okay.
This is from the album A Horse of Different Color. This is the act Big and Rich.
Oh, my God.
And we are going with their classic, iconic song, Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy.
Words I never thought would come up on this podcast. And I have PTSD from this song, Tim. I grew up in Southwest Virginia in the height of when this song came out. And let me tell you, it was everywhere. Also, Big and Rich kind of turned out to not age well. Because have you seen some of their personal? It's not good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really a fan of pop country, bro country, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think this is an instance of where if you enjoy this album and you enjoy that song, you might want to celebrate them just for their art and not for their art, not the artists themselves.
As been said many times on the No Name Music Cast, separate the art from the artists on this one, because you go down the Goog of Big and Rich and they're very interesting people.
Yes.
And I mean, in my mind, they're one-hit wonders. I'm being honest.
They had another hit called Coming to Your City. They had an album called Hillbilly Jedi.
I probably tried to just actively avoid all of that. Me and Hannah are probably in the same camp for Big and Rich. Because this song came out, I mean, it was everywhere, Tim.
Oh, goodness. We used to play this in Whiskey River. That's how I know about it.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, we used to open the first set with Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy. People used to love this.
Oh, yeah. They did. They did. And it was kind of at the onset of that pop meets country thing that we hear more now, Tim. Mm-hmm. This is like at the opening arena. This opened the floodgates for pop country, which is just pop music with a twang.
Well, as Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller will tell you, he said that contemporary pop country is bad 80s rock with a fiddle.
So you know what's funny? There is this, I don't know, have you ever watched King of the Hill, Tim, or do you even know what King of the Hill is?
I know what it is, and I've maybe seen one episode, but it's not something that I'm super into.
So for those who, like, Tim probably understands, so it's one of these cartoons that's, like, designed for adults, right? It has a lot of adult humor. I think Family Guy, I think Simpsons, all that kind of stuff. In it, though, there's a scene where... And if you're into this type of music, please don't take this as an insult, but this sticks out to me as one of the funniest things I've ever seen on TV, Tim. His son had been into Christian rock, like this Christian rock band, but they weren't actually a good influence or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so Hank goes to pick up Bobby, his son, from this Christian rock thing. He wasn't supposed to be there. And he goes, and another thing. As Christian rock artists, you're not doing anything but just making rock music worse. And he goes, you're not making Christianity any better, and you're just making rock music worse. Like that line of you're not making Christianity any better, and you're just making rock music worse was the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. And it sticks out to me like we were talking about the pop country, you're not making pop music any better. And you're only making country worse. I'm not wrong in my tin. It works.
No, it absolutely 100% works.
When I say, like, have you ever been watching something and you've laughed so hard you have tears, Sam? And like maybe it was you were the only person who found it that funny. But the first time he said that, I swear to you, I laughed for 10 minutes straight. Insert going to never going to a Creed concert here. If you love Creed, love Creed. I'm not trying to insult you. It's just a really funny joke.
Exactly.
As I found out, my husband knows every word to Creed, so take it with a grain of salt. All right, what's the next one, Tim?
Okay, got two more. So this is from the band Chickenfoot from their self-titled album Chickenfoot. Now, as you know, Chickenfoot were a supergroup. You had Sammy Hagar and Michael Anthony from Van Halen. You had guitarist extraordinaire Joe Satriani, and then you had Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers on the drums. They released two albums, and they had a live album with a greatest hits package as well. And this is from their first album that came out. And this is the song Oh Yeah. Now, I think this was probably a radio hit at the time. I was living in England when this came out, but I remember Hannah saying, she said that they are no doubt playing this on ROV right now.
Oh, yeah. That intro, the whoa, whoa, oh, if you were a healer, I'd use my hands. Yeah, that song. No, it definitely was. And it was like mid 2000s. I don't know exactly. Yep. Right after I got out of high school, right in college, I remember hearing this on the radio. Not something, and this was probably, I think Hannah's right. This is probably if I were to think of chicken foot. Yes, guys, they're playing football. No, chicken foot, this would be the first thing that would come to mind.
Yeah, they also had another song called Sexy Little Thing, which was another single type thing that they came out with. I mean, this was a great band. I mean, Sammy was, 15 years ago, whatever. His voice was in a lot better shape. Yep. Satriani is an amazing guitar player. You've got Chad Smith, you've got Michael Anthony, and it's effectively Van Halen, sort of. And it's just such a great band. And the funny thing is, in Aqua Teen Hunger Force, which is a cartoon we've discussed before.
I knew you were going to say it.
Yeah. Carl, the guy next door, his favorite band in the world is Chickenfoot. And then Michael Anthony and Sammy Hagar appear on an episode. It's great.
That I knew it was coming. I was like, he's gonna talk about it. I know it's coming. And Carl looks like his favorite band.
It would be Chickenfoot.
If you've never Googled Carl, Google Carl. As I'm beating my desk again. I've done that like 7 times on this episode. But anyway, and I will say, it's just, when I think of like, if we're going to put a super group that like defines American, like that kind of rock music, it would be Chickenfoot.
Yeah, 100%. I own the first Chickenfoot album. I currently don't have the live album Greatest Hits or their second album that they came out. But I have them on order. I had some extra money from a gig and I ordered them from eBay. So they're actually winging their way to me right now so I can complete my Chickenfoot collection so I can be at one with Carl.
But the second album is still called Chickenfoot 3, though, right?
Yeah, it's a Sammy
Hagar. I've never
Hagar.
understood that. Why?
It's a Sammy Hagar joke. I mean, let's call it 3. That'll confuse them.
Oh, it didn't confuse me. I just thought I missed something. All right. That sounds about like Sammy Hagar. He sounds like the dad who's going to be like, you know what I mean? Making a dad joke when you turn around or something.
There we are. All right. So I've got one more album that we're going to talk about. There's plenty more on this list, but we're going to cap this episode to about an hour like we normally do. Going from Chickenfoot and Megadeth, we're going to go to Bette Midler.
Of course.
Okay, and this is from a Greatest Hits compilation called Experience the Divine, in brackets, Greatest Hits. And we are going with a Rolling Stones cover, and this is Beast of Burden.
I have heard her version of this, and it is interesting to say the least.
Yeah, this is a song that we currently play in Flaker Hill. It's a song that I've enjoyed for many years. And when I was listening to this, I knew that she covered it. But I mean, it's just like, it's interesting to hear that she chose to cover this Rolling Stones song.
But to be fair, Bette Midler has such an interesting, diverse sound to her because, she's from theater. We know her on the stage, and no one sounds like Bette Midler but Bette Midler, right?
Yeah.
And Beast of Burden is a very hard rock, like it has that kind of vibe. Like if I were going to pick a Rolling Stone song for Bette Midler to cover, it would be Beast of Burden.
Yeah, I suppose so. And I mean, it's not like as iconic as Satisfaction or something that might sound a bit kooky if she did it. It's kind of generic enough where you think, that's a good cover.
I think I would put that at her because she could play with those runs and different things like that. You know what I mean? When he's like hitting those. So yeah, but I don't know. I can't unsee Bette Midler without thinking of her in the Witches movie that she's in. what is it? My God, Hocus Pocus.
Yeah.
That's all I see when I see Bette Midler anymore. It's just Hocus Pocus.
And she's also in an episode of Seinfeld as well.
I mean, she's a pretty good actress.
Yeah.
She was on theater. She was in theater before she was. I mean, most people, when they think of Bette Midler, the first thing that comes to mind is what? Wind Beneath My Wings, I would think.
Yeah. And of course, that is on there. I wasn't going to pick the obvious one for this one, which is why I picked Beast of Burden.
I mean, if you guys haven't heard it, I think it's worth a listen. It's cool to hear, and it's different than the original version, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Tim, what is your piece of advice for this week?
Okay, be kind to everybody that you meet. And again, if you live in the United States, make sure you are registered to vote.
And once again, if you need help registering to vote, you can reach out to me on Facebook, on Threads, on I don't care. You can even email me, joymorrison08@gmail.com. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
To remind me of another day to